Hey guys, Thomas here with Home Pro Property Management, and I'm coming to you today to talk about reference checks. Obviously, this is one of the main things that you're going to have to look at when it comes to a new applicant to fill a unit or a home that you have. And unfortunately, it's also the thing that's skipped over the most because it's also the most time consuming. But I find that this aspect is potentially one of the most important, absolutely, because you learn a little bit about who's actually going to be living in your home, and you can skip out on a whole lot of headache by doing these alone. So obviously, the main pieces that you're looking for in an applicant and usually required are income verification, credit history, criminal history, rental history, and then these reference checks. And obviously, the other things are a little bit more straightforward. So that's where this one comes in with a little bit more confusion and maybe a little bit more where people can sort of focus on. So, first things first. Before we talk about the specific types of questions and the types of references that you're going to get, I wanted to talk about the people that you're looking to actually fill your unit. Obviously, you're going to want somebody who's going to treat your property well. You're going to want somebody who's got a solid work ethic, because it usually comes sort of hand in hand. You're going to want somebody who's got obviously stable income and stable employment, clean and organized. You're going to want somebody who they point out and they make sure to put in maintenance requests, specifically when they're serious and can cause additional damage. This is something that is a little counterintuitive because you usually don't want to be, on the phone with these people all the time. You don't want people constantly bugging you. But if something's serious and it's going to cause additional damage, you want to know soon. So you want that. And then you're going to want somebody who's going to be a courteous neighbor, right? With all of this, sort of the main thing to keep in mind is obviously you're looking for somebody who's high quality, but not high maintenance. And those characteristics tend to sort of fall in line. So all of that's there. Now, even again, before we go into the questions, what if you don't have any references? What if they don't have any to give to you? Maybe they're young or what have you. They're just not willing to. Well, you've got four main options there. The latter of them are usually the ones that you want to follow through with, maybe even the first. The first being you can decline the application outright. You can say this is a requirement of the application. If you don't have any, then unfortunately you don't meet the requirements. You could accept them without references, which is not suggested because of the risk that's associated with it. You could get a cosigner, so that way if anything goes wrong, at least somebody else is on the hook. And you could always require an additional security deposit, assuming that doesn't go over 2, because here in Virginia, you can only legally charge up to 2 months as the security deposit. So, okay, now that all of that is out of the way, we're hitting into the meat of the actual video, which is the actual questions and the types of references that you are going to receive. So, the three types that you're going to get in order of importance are family and friends. It's less than ideal because they have usually a vested interest of helping this person, but that's fine. You can still learn from them. You've got work people and people from their career, and then you've got landlords, specifically previous landlords are the ones that are sort of ideal. So starting from the top and the least important, or the ones that you can really rely on the least amount, going to be your family and friends. Now, these you can still learn a lot from them. That you're wanting to make sure you're going to sort of read between the lines and listen for hesitations in their voice more than what they actually say, because typically they're going to be really good references no matter what. Another thing that you can sort of listen to on top of the hesitations are just sort of when you're getting a weird vibe or you're getting a less than interested sort of person on the other line. They could be busy, or that could be a reflection of the tenant that you're actually, or the applicant that you're actually looking at. Because usually people hang out with people who are similar to them. So if they're a little bit standoffish, well, you're potentially going to have somebody who's standoffish. So what kinds of questions are you asking them? Well, obviously, to start, how do you know them? How long have you known them? How would you describe their current or previous home? In terms of, is it organized? In terms of the kinds of decorations they use? You can sort of go in that direction. What do they do in their spare time? Do they smoke or have pets? And just describing their overall character. Those are obviously what you're sort of looking for, and those are some baseline questions that you're always going to want to make sure to ask. And from there, you now have work questions. People who work with this person, again, a little bit better because they're not quite as vested and not as interested as sort of potentially lying to you. And you can also learn a lot more about what is going on in their working life. So with these ones, Does the company, or does he work at your company? He or she work at your company? Obviously, it's a good place to start. From there, you can go into, are you their current or previous employer? So that's sort of asking the question in a slightly different manner. You're going to want to obviously do all of the income verification questions to sort of begin out, start salary, when they're hired, job title and job description. What are the terms of their employment to make sure they're maybe full-time rather than just a short term or short period of time or anything like that. Then you get into things that are going to learn a little bit more about their character. Tell me about their job performance. Do they come to work on time is another question that you can sort of learn a lot about somebody. What are their long-term job prospects? Are they potentially up for any promotions or anything like that? You're going to want somebody who's in your home for a long time, so you want to make sure that their employment is good for a long time. And you can learn to see how they're doing, and if they're doing well, usually it shows good character because they're able to get along with people. And speaking of which, how do you like working with this person? That's obviously another one. Can you provide an example of a time of why you like working with this person? And has this person ever gotten in trouble or been reprimanded at work? All of these questions are really important. Obviously, the beginning sort of goes from the income verification, with the latter questions really coming in to get some character references and understand a little bit more about them. Okay, so obviously those are the first two types of questions. You now have the third, and by far the best, but it comes with a little caveat. If you're getting reference being the current landlord, well, you don't necessarily know what their interest is. They could be giving you a gleaming review because, well, they want this person out of their home, or they could be giving you a terrible review because they want this great tenant to stay. So you always have to take a little bit on the current landlords with a little grain of salt. Previous landlords, those are sort of your ideal. So with all of that in mind, you're now sort of on the phone getting an idea of where they're at. And the first thing that you want to be aware of is this actually a landlord? Or is this somebody who they know who is lying to you about being a landlord? Obviously, that would be a really bad situation. So you need to ask a few questions that can flesh out that problem. First question that you could ask, which is really a curveball that people don't expect, is do you have any vacancies? That's an interesting question that somebody who's just lying and not actually the landlord would be really thrown off by. Do I have any vacancies? What does that even mean? How many properties should I say I have? Blah, 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 blah. So really good sort of curveball to make sure that you're on the phone with an actual landlord. And I find that it actually helps quite a bit. From there, you're going to want to ask for verification about the actual unit. The landlord's going to obviously know about it. Anybody who's faking it might not know. So address, which you've already been given, but you can make sure to confirm what the price is that they're renting at. Things like how long were they there, and really the basics along those lines sort of helps you get a little bit more info. From there, you're now asking additional questions to now learn about them as a tenant. You start out with or we like to start out with, well, did they stay for the stated period? Or did they try to move out early or anything along those lines? It's a good, really good place to start, and it gives you idea if they're going to try to potentially leave out on you early. Obviously, we already talked about all the basics when it comes to the monthly rent and things along those lines. So the next question would be, did they always pay rent on time? Right? That's a super important one. You want to make sure that you have somebody that is very on time, and really they got to respect you with their payments, because obviously that's the reason you own this property. And you're going to need that to get your mortgage covered. So anybody that's coming in late might cause you additional problems and fees from there. Did they always pay their utilities in full and on time? Did anyone else live with the tenant is another good question that you're going to want to ask. Did they ever receive any legal notices? So a lot of times notices are put up on the door, things along those lines that could happen after occupancy, which we have actually run into before, where they leave and they move out, and all of a sudden we get a note from the police office or anything along those lines stating that they're has a warrant or something along those lines. You then go into some of the more basics, right? Any pets? Was it well maintained? Did they take care of your place? Why did they leave is another good question, and see if they understand and know those things, which they might not always know. Did they give you proper notice before vacating? Did you withhold, and this is probably the most important question, did you withhold any of their security deposit when they moved out? because well, that's going to tell you a lot about how the unit was when the actual landlord had no reason to really give them anything at that point, because the relationship was essentially over. And finally, would you rent to this tenant again? So all of these questions and these types of conversations are extremely important. And if you skip over them, you are really putting yourself at risk in a pretty substantial way. You're risking your time, you're risking your home, and obviously you're risking your money. So these are the kinds of things that we have as conversations. Like I said, previous landlord is the best. Current landlord, you sometimes take it with a grain of salt. Work references are great before, after that, and then family and friends thereafter. So I hope this helps. I know this was probably a little longer than what we were meant to do, but I do find this to be extremely important. And so if you have any questions or anything else, feel free to add it in the comments or email me directly, and I am happy to help. Thanks, and have a good one.